Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is day 145, July the 28th, 2017, Friday. Fantastic. Pretty quick week for me. Hopefully it was for all of you. So anyway, here we are at Friday. You know, to start today's video, I got some real good stuff for you today, but to start today's video, I want to reflect on a story that goes back many, many years for me. Back to when I was in my late teens, maybe 16, 17, probably not even 18, probably a little less than that. But, you know, I'm sitting around with a bunch of my friends, and we used to hang out with this much older dude. We called him the hippie dude. He was probably like in his 40s. We were all like in our mid to late teens. But he would buy us beer. We were all too young to buy beer, so he would take us to the store, buy a bunch of cases of beer, and we would go back to his house and party, listen to music and things like that with the hippie dude. So we're sitting around one time and we're talking about this friend of ours who was one of these guys who got all the girls. It just seemed like we were all like trying just to get a date, and this friend of ours would have like hundreds of women swooning over him, throwing themselves at him. And we were talking about this thing, and our hippie buddy was just sitting back listening to all this, and being much older than all of us, he was just sitting back listening. And then at some point he said, you know what, you guys, here it is. The more girls you get, the more girls you get. Which at the time didn't sound too profound. I just thought, you know, okay, well, the more girls you get, the more girls you get. Okay, I guess. I didn't understand exactly how profound that statement was. But the fact of the matter is, as you go through life, whether it's through life experience or the study of religion or the study of philosophy, you find that this life principle is always at play, and not just with girls, but it applies to everything. For instance, if you're a girl, the more guys you get, the more guys you get. With wealth, the more wealth you get, the more wealth you get. That's why 10% of the people have 90% of the money. The more happiness you get, the more happiness you get. The more poverty you get, the more poverty you get. The more sadness you get, the more sadness you get. The more you get, the more you get of whatever it is. This is a life principle, and when I first came in contact with this many, many years ago, I didn't quite understand it, but over the years I have really come to understand it. And it is like anything else that is a life principle. It's always true. Now, what does this have to do with TowerGate? Well, as I've been talking about for several weeks now, we need to go on offense. Trump needs to go on offense. Not so much Trump, because he is on offense using his Twitter account. And but it's the people around him he's not getting any support from, and I'm suggesting, and I've been beating up on Jeff Sessions pretty badly, that he needs to go on offense. He's the man who's in the position to actually generate the offense, to launch the investigations, to do something to get these people off of Trump. But what's been happening is the principle. The more you get, the more you get. And so Donald Trump has been under massive assault, and as a result, that he's been completely in a defensive mode, and there's been no offense other than his Twitter account, which sometimes is used against him, again, which does him harm. So the fact that he's not getting any defense here, it's given this principle of the more you get of something, the more you get of it, has continued to play itself out. Now, fortunately, there are many other life principles that come into play. For instance, many things in life are a double-edged sword. So let's just say that you like this principle of the more you get, the more you get, and you want to get some wealth so that you can get some more wealth. And so you go about the pursuit of wealth, but in the process of doing so, you engage in lying, cheating, and stealing. Or you become greedy. Well, now you're dealing with another life principle, and everything in life is a double-edged sword. So what we see with the Democrats is they've certainly been, and the liberal media, and the left, and the deep state, and all those participating in the deep state coup, they've been on the winning side for some time now of the more they get, the more they get. And Donald Trump's been on the losing side of the more you get, the more you get. But because another principle has kicked in, which is that all of this was based on lies, hatred, deceit, jealousy, anger, and all of these negative emotions. All these negative things are what's been driving that. So now, another principle is taking hold. And that is that you reap what you sow. And what has the deep state, the Democrats, and all their friends been reaping? Well, they've been planting the seeds of hatred, lies, deceit, anger, and all these other negative things. And so now we are seeing the double-edged sword, and another life principle is taking hold, and things are starting to turn. Trump and the people around him, do need to continue on offense. They do need to get on offense and stay on it. But they must be honest, and they must be seeking justice, and they must be doing the right thing for the right reasons. If they follow this life principle, they can turn this around so that the more that they get, the more that they get in a positive way. But unlike the Democrats, the deep state and their friends who fell into the double-edged sword, the other life principle, Trump and his people around him need to play it straight. They need to be honest, and they need to seek justice, and they need to go about it in the right way. And if they do this, all will end well. So, this is just something that you can keep in mind, whether you like to read philosophy or read religious works, or if you just like to observe life, your own life, other people in their lives. Take a look around you. Take a look at your own life, and I think you'll see that the more you get, the more you get. Bill Browder. Remember Bill Browder? I told you about him. He's the man who owns this company over in the UK, who was the one who was responsible for the Magnitsky Act. It was Mr. Magnitsky who was his lawyer, who he claims was arrested by the Russian government, thrown in jail, beaten and tortured to death. And that's what led to the Magnitsky Act. And I told you he would be testifying in front of Congress today. Well, he was there, and he testified in open session. My oh my, you should watch the video, particularly the exchange between him and Lindsey Graham. The look on Lindsey Graham's face is a classic. I want to frame it. According to Bill Browder, Fusion GPS was working on behalf of the Russian government when they created the Dossier. Let me repeat that, because I know you're going, what did he just say? Say that again? Okay. According to Bill Browder, Fusion GPS was working on behalf of the Russian government when they created the Dossier. You know, the dossier that John McCain went over and got from Christopher Steele. So is John McCain, Senator Magoo, in association, working on behalf of the Russian government when he went in pursuit of the dossier? That's an interesting question, isn't it? He says that Fusion GPS was receiving money indirectly from a senior Russian government official. Now, you should have seen the look on Lindsey Graham's face when Mr. Browder said that. Lindsey Graham got stone-faced. I mean, he literally got a... like he just got hit with a baseball bat in the head. was like, huh? Let me get this straight, he says. You're saying that Fusion GPS was working on behalf of the Russian government when they created the dossier, and that one of the main sources for getting the dossier done was coming from a senior Russian official. Mr. Browder, that's right. That's exactly what I said, and I can prove it. Very, very interesting. Man, I'll imagine there's Democrats were probably relieving themselves in their adult Pampers. I imagine they couldn't have enjoyed that very much. I bet they were twitching in their seats and sweating profusely. And that's an extraordinary, extraordinary statement, because if in fact what Mr. Browder is true, it turns this entire thing on its head, because we were led to believe that the dossier, the people at Fusion GPS hate Trump. Christopher Steele hates Trump. They were doing this on behalf of a Democratic donor, which, if the truth be known, if the money trail was ever sniffed out behind that Democratic donor, and it may be at some point, we'd find out it leads right back directly to the Clintons. Then what it would actually look like is that the Russians were behind this, putting together the dossier, what, to destroy Trump? It's all getting very confusing. It's all getting very confusing now. But still, you can certainly have some fun with this, can't we? When I saw that on the video, because I heard about it, and I thought, well, they've obviously got the report wrong. Because what I just heard on the radio, that can't be right. I'll go home and check it out. So I get home, I Google it, I watch the video, I read the story from 2 or 3 different places, Daily Caller, Conservative Journal, American Spectator, all have the story and the video, and you sit there and watch it, and you watch Mr. Browder, and he seems like a pretty sharp guy, by the way. I didn't know who Mr. Browder was, but watching a little bit of his testimony, this guy is no idiot. He's a pretty smart feller. And the fact that he looked Lindsey Graham directly in the face and told him this, it was quite a moment. I know it was for me. It had to be for Lindsey Graham, because this is not what they were expecting to hear, I don't believe. But that is what Mr. Browder stated today in his hearing. Fusion GPS was working on behalf of the Russian government when they created the dossier. GPS was receiving money indirectly from a senior Russian government official. This makes the story incredibly confusing. I would have to sit and think about this one for a while. But it is very possible that if you look at the situation, that the Russians might have preferred Hillary. Let's face it. You know, the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. I mean, the fact of the matter is, the Russians did very, very well under the Obama administration. They did very well with the foreign policy team that was under Obama, which was led by Hillary Clinton, Samantha Power, and Susan Rice. Lavrov had his way with all of them at the UN. Russia was able to annex Crimea, and of course I have no problem with that. The people in Crimea voted for that referendum. It's like the Russians went in and attacked them and took over their little country. And the fact of the matter is, those people are much closer to Russians than they are to Western Europeans. Putin was never forced to back down or do anything that he didn't want to do in Syria. He continued doing exactly what he wanted to do, and at the end of the day, it appears now that he was victorious, because Trump has said that he's going to be cutting the CIA program, which was funding the foreign fighters that were coming into Syria, which is what Putin was hoping for and wanting to see happen all along. But you look at every area of foreign policy as it relates to Russia during the Obama years, and you can see that Putin had his way with the Obama administration. You can see that Lavrov danced circles around Susan Rice and Samantha Power and Hillary Clinton. He made fools of them. It was like a pro against a bunch of amateurs. It was like the seniors against the junior varsity, the freshmen. It wasn't even close. It was the pros against the intramurals. That's exactly what it was. And, of course, we know that Donald Trump wanted to be energy independent. He wanted to export a lot more oil and gas to Europe. And of course, this is the probably #1 issue for the Russians. They rely heavily upon their exports of natural gas and oil to Europe, not just for the money, but for political leverage. So it really makes a lot of sense when you think about it, that the Russian government would have probably been happier with Clinton than with Trump. Makes a lot of sense. When you look at it that way, what Mr. Browder is saying, I mean, there was nobody laughing when he said this. Watch the video. Nobody laughed. They looked at him and said, say that again? And he had no problem saying it. He didn't stumble over his words. He wasn't shy. He put it right out there and said it. And extraordinary moment. Gives us all something to ponder, to think about, and talk about flipping something on its head. My goodness. I imagine eventually they will get Fusion GPS one way or another on in some sort of situation where they have to testify. Of course, they can always plead the fifth, but I just don't see how much longer Fusion GPS is deeply connected as they are to all of this stuff, how much longer they can go on being silent like they are. And maybe we'll learn something there, but maybe we'll learn it from another source. Maybe it will come out in the civil case against Mr. Gvt, because I'm certain that Fusion GPS will be called to testify in those hearings against BuzzFeed and Christopher Steele. I'm sure they will. We'll find out what comes out of the civil hearings. But there you go. Mr. Bill Browder showed up, testified, and that's what he said. Drop the bomb. Very interesting. I told you yesterday, I talked about Scaramucci, Tony Scaramucci, the new press secretary, press spokesman. And I think he's over all of them. I think he's like the head team guy that now over his communications. I thought it was great. He basically came out and suggested that Priebus is leaking, and that Priebus was allowing leaks, participating in leaks. I've never been a fan of Reince Priebus. He's establishment all the way, a GOP insider all the way, a backstabber. I wouldn't trust him as far as I can throw him. I've never liked Priebus. I think Trump only put him in there because of his experience in knowing how to run an administration, allegedly. He hasn't seemed to have done a very good job. There's a lot of judges that still have not been appointed. There's a lot of things that are in disarray, and I don't really think that he's done a very good job. But apparently they're not looking to take out Priebus, but it's very interesting that Trump's press secretary, Scaramucci, would come out and make a statement like that publicly about Priebus. Now, if he would have said it in private, in a private meeting with Reince Priebus and said, hey man, I think you've been doing some leaking, okay? But he didn't. He said it. I think he did it in a tweet. And then after the tweet, he appeared on, I think, CNN, or, yeah, it was CNN, and with the Cuomo guy. And it was about a 25, 30-minute interview, which I watched, most of it. And, you know, Scaramucci, I mean, he's a lot like Donald Trump. You know, he don't pull any punches. He says exactly what he thinks. Extraordinary that he would say this, that the press secretary would say this about the chief of staff publicly. It tells you a lot about what we're going to see out of Scaramucci. It's going to be quite entertaining at the very least. But one thing's for sure, I think the media has been put on notice. CNN, MSNBC, and all their friends, New York Times, Washington Post. Scaramucci is not going to tolerate this stuff. I mean, he will not. I mean, this guy will come out two-fisted, and he will hit you back twice as hard as you hit him. In this case, the president. That's who he's fighting for. So he'll make some boo-boos. He'll step on it a few times, I'm sure. But at the end result, it's going to be a lot more entertaining than it has been, and hopefully we're going to see a lot more pushing back. And I think that that's what it looks like Trump has really started to do in the last week to turn things around. If we could just get Jeff Sessions to resign, that would be great. And hopefully when Christopher Wray, the new FBI director, comes in, he will actually begin to pursue some of these criminal activities, and he can recommend to the Attorney General to pursue charges against Hillary for the email scandal and all these other things. Debbie Wasserman Schultz has finally fired Imran Awan. Well, she finally fired him after the FBI arrested him, charged him with bank fraud and possible blackmail. Now, I was thinking that the blackmail was probably her, but it appears now under more investigation that they suspect that the blackmail was actually his mother-in-law. Yes, it appears that Imran Awan was blackmailing his own mother-in-law. But he's probably blackmailing Debbie Wasserman Schultz too. He's a blackmailer. He's probably blackmailing everybody that he can. That's what he probably does. He gets information and then uses it. He certainly has pocketed lots of money. He had 12 grand on his pocket. He just transferred 300,000 to Pakistan, and he was on his way to flee there, and he was likely never planning on coming back here. But here's some interesting information for you. Now that he's back in the District of Columbia, in that justice system, if you can call the justice system in the District of Columbia a justice system, guess who the district attorney is in the District of Columbia who will be overseeing the case against Mr. Awan? Well, it's a fellow named Steve Wasserman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz's brother. That's right. Debbie Blabbermouth Do Anything for Hillary Wasserman Schultz brother is the district attorney in the District of Columbia. How about that? That's rich. Oh, speaking of rich, he was also the district attorney who was overlooking or overseeing in charge of the case of Seth Rich. Just keeps getting more and more interesting, does it? So, we will have to see how this all plays out. Debbie Wasserman Blabbermouth Schultz brother is the district attorney in the place where the Seth Rich case is, and in the very place where Awan is going to be dealt with. We'll see how that works out. Donald Trump's spokesperson, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, says that there should be a thorough investigation of Imran Awan. Now, it's kind of funny she would make this statement. I know why she did it, because not a single one of the liberal media will touch this story. Go to Washington Post, New York Times. I've done it. Go to Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, MSNBC. They are not talking, nor will they talk about the case of Imran Awan. Clearly, they've gotten the phone call. Yes, they've gotten the phone call. And of course, as I told you yesterday, Mr. Awan didn't stay in jail long enough for anybody to get to him, such as the FBI or the Metro Police, the Capitol Police, I believe it is, that's handling this particular issue. They didn't have very much time to get in there and put him in a sweat box and see if he would talk, because the Clintons had wanted their lawyers, apparently, go make his bail for him, get him out of jail. We don't know where he is right now. We just know that he's somewhere in the U.S., probably in the state of Virginia, with a ankle bracelet. I don't think that will keep him safe. I think he's as good as dead, if you ask me. Just my opinion. Do you remember when, about month and a half ago, we all watched the video where Debbie Wasserman Schultz is threatening the Capitol Hill police chief over the return of a laptop computer? Well, we now have some more information about that laptop computer. As it turns out, that laptop computer was a computer that Wasserman Schultz used to keep certain information on. And it was actually in a safe place, a secure place, or what's been described as a secret place. It was in a basement office where the congressional offices are, in an office that was not being used. Nothing else in the office, maybe a desk and a chair or something, but that's where this computer was. And in the process of conducting their investigation, the Capitol Police gained entrance to this room and they got their hands on this laptop. That is the laptop in question. That is the computer that Debbie Wasserman Schultz is extremely concerned about. The one that she was willing to threaten the police chief over. The one that she's got her attorneys working hard to have returned to her. It's the computer that they're being prevented from looking at because of a motion filed by her attorney. But now it appears that none of that's going to matter, because now this has now becoming a federal investigation, because now that it involves international money laundering and bank fraud, it's now in the purview of the FBI. So now the FBI is going to be taking over the case. The Capitol Police will be turning over all their information, including this laptop, to the FBI. Hopefully just in time for Christopher Wray to come into office and be sworn in as the new FBI director. And maybe Mr. Wray will sit around and take a gander at that computer, at that laptop, and see what is on that laptop that's making Debbie Wasserman Schultz so crazy. But if you remember back in that meeting when Debbie Wasserman Schultz was having that face-to-face with this Capitol Hill police chief, and she said to him the phrase, and I quote, "There will be consequences if the laptop is not returned to her office. There will be consequences if that laptop is not returned to my office." That's funny, because at the time it was a threat against him by Debbie Blabbermouth Wasserman Schultz to try to scare or intimidate the Capitol Hill police chief. But now it's all been turned around, but the words of Debbie Wasserman Schultz ring even more true, that there will be consequences if that laptop is not returned to her office. Yes, Debbie Blabbermouth, do anything for Hillary Wasserman Schultz. There will be consequences if what's on that laptop ties you to the mysterious demise of Seth Rich, or the cover-up of what happened regarding Seth Rich, or anything having to do with Seth Rich. If there's anything, it won't take much. And of course, I'm sure some of you have already heard that the detective who sometimes appears on Fox News, Rob Wheeler, as soon as he heard about this arrest, he tweeted out that, according to his sources and some information that he has, which he can't talk too much about, the information that Mr. Awan has is damaging, and it does have to do with Seth Rich. There is a local reporter in Florida where Debbie Wasserman Blabbermouth Schultz lives. He's known her for many years. He covers the local beat there in her district. He knows many local politicians. He tweeted out on his Twitter that people around Debbie Wasserman Schultz have never seen her so freaked out as she is now since she heard about the arrest of Mr. Awan. She is totally freaking out. My guess is it was her and probably the Clintons that made arrangements for Mr. Awan to get the hell out of the country. But he didn't make it. The FBI got there first. And now he's under arrest, but they got him out of jail. But you have to ask yourself, are the Clintons crazy enough to assist Mr. Awan in achieving room temperature prematurely? Are they crazy enough to do that with all this swirling around? Are they that ballsy? Are they that crazy? Do they think they can get away with that? You bet your ass they can, and do. Certainly believe it. They've gotten away with everything else. Alrighty, well that's TowerGate for day 145, July the 28th, 2017, Friday. Thank you so much for tuning in, for all the thumbs up. Love reading all your comments. Do you think that Mr. Owan has some information about Seth Rich? And do you think that information is on that laptop that Debbie Wasserman Schultz is dying to get back into her hands, which now she's not going to, because it now belongs to the FBI? Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you tomorrow night. Goodbye.